I took a 5-month solo backpacking trip through sub-Saharan Africa. Left, I was in something called the multimedia industry, came back, something called the internet had emerged on the scene. And all my friends were running to that new industry, and I had seen unconscionable poverty in Africa when I was traveling, and I'd made a decision that I was going to figure out how to use my talent and career to change that. And so I didn't get involved in the dot-com craze. I changed instead and started working at the intersection of technology and business thinking to solve poverty internationally. I heard about impact investing and the idea of putting your money to work for good and for social return and financial return at the same time. And even though I was not a high net wealth individual like most of the people, virtually everyone doing that kind of investing in the late 1990s, early 2000s, I decided I was going to try to figure out how to do that with my own money because I'd made such big changes in my career. I walked away from salary, potential riches, and wanted to do something different and felt my money needed to follow me. The vast majority of us really want to see. And when I started doing values-aligned investing, impact investing, the way people were talking about how to make decisions in this space were really esoteric. It's like, well, use your values, like integrity, right? We're talking about integrity or honesty or community, but these are not things that you can actually apply to investing. But the Sustainable Development Goals are. And so they've started to become de facto metrics or framework that people can use for this kind of investing.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. Today, the market is crashing a bit. You know, we've seen it go down into a correction of about 10%. People may be getting a little nervous. And we're recording this on March 11th. So
March 11th. March 10th was a really bad day. Now, by the time this airs, who knows what the market will be doing?
Yeah, but today I tax loss harvested, and I hope you guys have figured that out so that you too can take advantage of this hopefully short downturn. At any rate, we're going to be talking to somebody who's giving us an uplift or an upturn, Janine Firpo. And I want Jackie to introduce her because this episode will be a little bit about the power of women in investing.
Yeah, well, Janine and I have become friends. I love her. She is an accomplished speaker, author, and entrepreneur with a long history of working at the intersection of women and their money. From the early years of Apple Computer to senior positions with Hewlett-Packard, the World Bank, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Janine has always found herself making an impact. In 2017, she left a successful 35-year career in technology and international development. And she did that to focus on how women can create a more just and equitable society through their financial investments. Her book, which is right behind me, called Activate Your Money, Invest to Grow Your Wealth and Build a Better World, was published in 2021 through Wiley Publishing. Later that year, she co-founded Invest for Better, a nonprofit organization that is catalyzing a movement in which millions of professional women are educated, enabled, and empowered to activate their power of their money for themselves and the world. Janine walks her talk. She is taking action to move all her own assets into investment that she feels good about and is watching them grow with market rate returns. She is also a lead investor in Next Wave Impact, a venture fund designed to help more women become angel investors. In 2024, Forbes named Janine as one of 50 over 50 female leaders who continue to make an impact later in life. Janine, welcome to Catching Up to FI.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be here.
Well, I don't think I've ever talked to somebody who's 50, over 50, and they talk about being senior, but you're not senior. You're very youthful and very active. And we're going to talk today about all the great things you're doing for values assigned investing, or values aligned investing, which is really, really exciting. But before we get going there, in order to understand you a little better, I think we need to understand your journey to this topic of values aligned investing. So, what was your professional journey that led you here? Because you've had a wild and crazy ride.
I sure have. No kidding. So I fell into the computer industry by a total accident in the 1970s, believe it or not, and started my professional career in 1981 before there were even personal computers. So my tech background goes back to punching cards on mainframe computers and coding in assembly language programming. And I had an amazing career for 15 years in the Valley, worked for Apple Computer in the 80s when it was wildly crazy to be there, and then quit a job in 1995 to travel. And I took a 5-month solo backpacking trip through sub-Saharan Africa. Left, I was in something called the multimedia industry, came back, something called the internet had emerged on the scene. And all my friends were running to that new industry. And I had seen unconscionable poverty in Africa when I was traveling. And I'd made a decision that I was going to figure out how to use my talent and career to change that. And so I didn't get involved in the dot-com craze. I changed instead and started working at the intersection of technology and business thinking to solve poverty internationally, and had a 20-year career doing that. And while I was doing that, I was sort of a social entrepreneur before that was a term. And I heard about impact investing and the idea of putting your money to work for good and for social return and financial return at the same time. And even though I was not a high net wealth individual like most of the people, virtually everyone doing that kind of investing in the late 1990s, early 2000s, I decided I was going to try to figure out how to do that with my own money because I'd made such big changes in my career. I walked away from salary, potential riches, and wanted to do something different and felt my money needed to follow me. So that's what I did. And I had a variety of financial advisors that were supposed to help me get where I wanted to be, and they didn't help me. So when I retired from my salary, I realized that's all I really retired from because I worked as hard as I ever could. In 2017, I took my money back, realized anyone could invest this way, regardless of how much money you had. And I decided to help other people do it because it had been such a journey for me. And so that's why I wrote Activate Your Money. And as I was writing the book, I met a woman named Ellen Remmer who lived in Boston, and she was putting women in small groups to teach them these skills. And she and I decided better to partner than to compete. And so we joined together and founded Invest for Better in September of 2021.
Yeah, I mean, that Invest for Better charity is something we want to give a shout out to because we give a shout out to charities in every episode. Go to investforbetter.org and you can help out this effort. Now, you remind me actually of a guest we had in the past named Vicki Robin.
Oh, yeah.
She invests according to her values as well. She invests on her island in local farms. She invests in solar energy. She invests in small business. And she is also a proponent of values aligned investing. So, and she is one of the godmothers of FI, but she doesn't necessarily follow the principles of FI. And she follows your principles maybe before they were sexy, right?
Yeah. Actually, I've talked with her. So I heard about her, and she has shifted away from sort of the fire stuff in that that's not what she purports anymore, but she's doing a lot. I think she's in her 80s, and she writes a lot about aging, which is really interesting to me. And she also writes a lot about local investing, which I think is also important. And I loved her. She and I had an amazing conversation. I got to know her through FinCon, actually. Somebody at FinCon knew her and was willing to make the introduction, and she was kind enough to just spend some time with a completely unknown person, and we had a great conversation.
She does, and this is what we're about. We vote with our money, right? I mean, that is a primary vote that we have, a power that we have that we don't necessarily realize. We can spend on responsible consumption. We can save and save where. and we can invest with whom or on what, and we can give how and get advice where. There are so many avenues with which you vote with your money, not just by proxy on an individual stock, for example, that we need to look at all these avenues, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I think our investment dollars are among the most important. So if you think about philanthropy, so what we're told often is that you should use part of your money to invest and grow as much as you possibly can. You want to maximize that return, and then you do good through your philanthropic dollars. But if you look at all of the philanthropic money in the world, depending on who you're talking to, it's between 0.5 to 1.5% of the total assets in the world. So the amount of money that actually goes out through philanthropy is teeny, teeny, tiny, nowhere near enough to solve the problems that we have in the world. And so what our money is doing, every dollar that we have, even the cash that we have in the bank, is having an impact. Somebody is using it for some purpose. And if we're not paying attention to that purpose, chances are we're invested in the things that we don't want to see in the world, right? So if you think about it, money is really power. And where money goes, the companies, the products, the services that we invest in, those are the companies and the products and the services we get. And the companies and products and services we don't invest in are the ones that never happen, that go away. It's not surprising, for example, that because women have not taken control of invest their own money in this country, that we have a dearth of maternal health solutions, or that we have a dearth of products and services that are actually made for women, or that we have, situations where safety products are based on men's bodies as opposed to women's bodies. There's a reason why we get the kinds of reality that we're living in, and we can change that with our money.
So, Janine, I'm curious about your early days of working in tech, okay? When I think of tech, Silicon Valley, startups, I'm thinking you get these big stock options and equity compensation. And obviously, there had to be something to help you launch into following your passion. You took some sabbaticals and things like that. So how did you build your early wealth?
So my wealth was a long flow accumulation. And part of it was my mom. My mom and dad both came out of the Depression. Money was hard when I was a kid. I remember my mom struggling to find enough for us to eat. We drank powdered milk because she couldn't afford whole milk. We lived in hand-me-down clothes. And at some point, my mom was like the scene of Scarlett O'Hara, Gone with the Wind, where she stands up and she says, "I will never be hungry again." That was my mom. At some point, she was like, "I'm done with this." And she taught herself real estate, and she started learning how to buy and sell properties. And she taught us when I was in junior high school, just by osmosis. I learned from my mom. She started investing in the stock market in the 80s. So I started investing in my 20s. I bought my first house before I was 30, and I saved diligently. I gave up stuff. I lived a very scarce life. I lived way below my means. I always have. I still do. And I saved and I invested and I bought more real estate when I could. And, I was kind of fire. I realized before it was a thing. And it was because I was scared to death that I was going to be old and alone and living under a bridge because I couldn't afford a house. So I was just really, really careful with my money, and I built my wealth over time. My mom passed some things on to me when she passed away, but I was not one of those people who got stock options. I did not make a lot of money in the tech market. That wasn't me. It was a long process.
And the interesting thing is, we haven't heard one thing about your dad and what he taught you about money. It's all come from your mom, and you're all about female empowerment. Why is that?
That's such a great question. You know what? I've never thought about that before, but you're right, because my mom was the financially savvy one in the family. My dad was a super smart guy who should have been a professor and couldn't do that because of the times, but he was not the money savvy one in the family. My mom was the money savvy one.
Wow. Do you have any specific, I guess, experiences in tech that sort of put you in a position where you wanted to pour into this women empowerment and this impact investing? Because you spent 35 plus years in the tech industry. Anything you saw or any experiences that really led to you being uber focused and passionate about this?
About the women aspect of it.
Yeah.
I started my career in 1981, and I was the only female programmer. I was often the only woman in a room, and there's a lot of testosterone in the tech industry. Women were not really paid attention to. I mean, I saw this. I had instances where the whole story of misogyny and sexual advances, I mean, all of that kind of stuff happened to me through the early part of my career. I actually left Apple in 1991 because I was living in San Francisco, commuting 45 minutes each way to work every day. And I wanted to work from home 1 day a week. Apple was saying that this is what we do. We're building this future where people can telecommute. I'm like, cool, let me do that 1 day a week. They said no. I said, I quit. So I quit my job, and I started, from that point forward, I started telecommuting as of 1991. And so I telecommuted for almost 15 or 16 years, something like that. Never went back to an office every day. And then I took a job. And in the interim, I really thought all of this stuff around women in tech had kind of disappeared. I thought women in business and not having equality with men had disappeared. And then I went to work for the Gates Foundation, and I had to move to Seattle, and I had to go to the office every day. And it took me about a year to figure it out. And then I realized this hasn't gone away. It's just gone underground. So what used to be totally in your face, like men literally propositioning your boss, literally propositioning you and saying, if you don't show up the way I want you to show up, you're not going to get that promotion. I mean, I have had that happen to me. That wasn't there anymore, but these little digs were there where every day stuff happened in little tiny ways that just undermined women, that didn't really respect women at the level that they should be respected. And I was very saddened by it because I really thought we were done with this, but we are not.
You were working from home before working from home was a thing.
Way before.
How long were you at Apple?
I was at Apple for about 5 or 6 years, from 85 to 91.
Do you ever regret your choice to leave?
Never. No. One of the things, I've been super fortunate in my career. I always loved the work that I did. And as soon as I didn't like it, so normally my MO was I'd get a job, I'd kick it for 6 weeks, 2 months. I'd work my hiney off to be the best that they could have possibly had, the best person they could have possibly hired. I wanted people to be really impressed. And then I built sort of my reputation in those first couple of months. And then about 6 months in, I'd start thinking about, what do I want to do next? And I'd spend the next year and a half planning for my next job. So I was ready to walk into my next job, and I was always able to just move from one position to another that I really liked and really enjoyed, and never really got to a position where I didn't like what I was doing anymore. And because I was saving super aggressively, the wise wisdom is that you should have 3 to 6 months of your run rate in a savings account. I always had a year. I had a year of money stacked away so that I could quit, do what I wanted to do. I once walked away from a job because they asked me to do something unethical, and I was like, nope, not doing that. I'm leaving. And, it just gave me a lot of freedom and flexibility to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, J.L. Collins would call that FU money.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. And so Janine, do you mind sharing with us what was unethical? Are you comfortable with that?
I don't think I want to do that. I'll just quickly say I was asked to fire somebody who did not deserve to be fired. It was a situation where a person in a leadership role was mad, and as a result of anger wanted me to fire somebody who worked for me who didn't deserve to be fired. And I said, no, I won't
And
do
you
it.
stood up for your values. And you sharing your story, I'm seeing all these themes of, you having these high ethical values and able to actually act on them, because some people are so fearful of losing their job, or they're not financially able to say no. They're not financially able to walk away. So it sounds like at the point when you left Apple, or at this point where you were asked to do something unethical, you were able to say, I'm not doing that. And you had the comfort of knowing that financially you've got that 1 year of cushion in an emergency fund where you're going to be okay. Like Bill said, that FU money.
Exactly. In fact, when I walked away from that job, I'll never forget this. One of the other people who worked there was a man who had a wife who didn't work and 3 kids. And he said to me, Janine, you are so lucky that you can make this choice. He said, I could never do that, because I not only have to make sure I'm happy, but I have to take care of my kids and my wife. And one of the things I think about a lot, because I'm working on a campaign right now, we want to help women and people think about what would the world look like if women had been equal parts of the economy, equal players in the economy for the last 100 years. We're thinking about these kinds of things. And the thing is that a world like that, it's not just better for women, it's better for men too. Because when you are the sole male and all the responsibilities on you for everyone in your family, that is a lot of pressure, right? But if we can create a world where women start to step into their financial power, start to step into what they can do, it gives men a lot of freedom to live the lives they want to live too, and they don't have to feel caught in whatever societal roles are forcing them to live, even if it doesn't fit who they really are.
No, I completely agree, because my wife is fully employed and she was part-time employed during when we were raising kids, but it does take the pressure off. Given her employment, I could walk away now and be financially free as long as she continued to work. And that is a powerful thing to know that, what? And I live in a world where you're only as good as your last mistake, and you can lose your job at the flip of the coin and be 90 days out of work. So it requires a team to run the family business. It's like a built-in disability policy to have that as a backup as well, not only your individual wealth. You were impacted by people, and at every turn, somebody in your career said, because you were going to go into biology or medicine, I remember, and somebody said to you, computers. And that sent you in that direction. And then when you were in sub-Saharan Africa, you saw poverty on your sabbatical, and that sent you in another direction. I think that's where you learned about sustainable development goals. Can you tell us what those are and how they influenced you?
So when I got involved in international development in 2025, there were about 35 countries that established 17 goals, and they're called the Sustainable Development Goals. And they were ratified by all 193 countries of the United Nations in 2015. And these were goals that countries and companies and individuals could work toward. Things like no poverty, or quality education, clean water, sustainable cities, recyclables, equity, etc. Really admirable goals, and things that I think the vast majority of us really want to see. And when I started doing values-aligned investing, impact investing, the way people were talking about how to make decisions in this space were really esoteric. It's like, well, use your values, like integrity, right? We're talking about integrity or honesty or community, but these are not things that you can actually apply to investing. But the Sustainable Development Goals are. And so they've started to become de facto metrics or framework that people can use for this kind of investing. And there's something that we teach to the women that go through our training at Invest for Better as a way to prioritize their goals. Because when you think about investing the way that I'm talking about, you're never going to get perfect, and this is actually one of the things that stops people is they think, well, if I'm going to invest with my values, how do I choose a company? How do I choose a fund? Because I want it to be perfect. I want it to be thinking about sustainability and the environment, and I want it to be great in terms of workers' rights, and I want it to have a diverse board, and I want it to have this other thing, and I want. And the reality is you're never going to get all of those things in any one company or any one fund. And so you're going to have to prioritize. Do you prioritize the environment, or do you prioritize not being invested in private prisons, or do you prioritize another value, whatever your values are? So the Sustainable Development Goals help that. And what we recommend to the women who go through our training is pick 1 to 3 and then use those to guide your investing decisions.
I think some people do think it's like all or none, and you won't have it perfect. Like for me, I mainly do index funds, broad market index funds. I have chosen the one that aligns with me the best. But on top of that, I'm probably one of the few people in the fire community that has an individual stock portfolio. And I would say over the last 5 years or so, I have been weeding through and getting rid of certain things that didn't align with my values. And just doing that little part made me feel good. Like, for instance, I got rid of a tobacco company. I think I originally got it because it had a great dividend, but not worth it. And then I had a company, I had no idea, but I discovered after doing my research that they were heavily invested in private prisons. So those are just two small things that matter to me. And to your point, think about the values and the areas that mean enough to you to want to do a little something extra about it as it relates to your investing.
Exactly. And you don't have to do it all either. So I'm seeking what I call 100% portfolio alignment. And what that means is I start with my cash. I look at my fixed income, my stock portfolio. I started doing private investing a little while back, and I invest in female CEOs because they get only 2% of all of the venture in this country, 2%. And Black women CEOs get 35 basis points. So those are underrepresented, and so I invest there. And I also look at this in terms of my real estate. I mean, I'm looking at it from one end to the other, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to do that. And even if they just look at one asset class or one fund, or they decide, you know what, maybe I don't want to be in this particular index fund anymore, I'm not going to sell it because I have embedded gains there. But from now on, as I'm buying, I'm going to buy something else. There are many, many ways you can do this. Or think, I'm going to move my savings account or my checking account to a bank that's actually in my local community and supporting people there, or a bank that's providing loans for environmental purposes, or a bank that's supporting female entrepreneurs, or a Black-owned bank. There are so many options for us in every single asset class. There are so many options.
Well, I haven't ever thought about what I do with my cash. And I have to admit, I looked at one of your guides to red versus green on one of the websites. And because of convenience, I bank with JP Morgan Chase, and they're one of the worst. They're one of the big four banks that invest in all the sin stocks and does everything wrong with regards to this. And you talk about, for example, Aspiration Bank, where you can invest your cash and they plant a tree for different things and avoid petroleum investments, for example. And I'm an ally where they're a little bit better than JP Morgan Chase, but not like Aspiration. And they're both digital banks that help you manage your cash, right?
Right. Exactly. And there are some other ones that have come up since Aspiration. They were the first, but there are some other digital banks now too. And I just learned the other day that One United, which is a Black-owned and run bank, is also got a digital bank now. They're the first Black-owned digital bank. So there are other options like that. And I bought a CD in a bank called Climate First Bank. They're based out of Florida. They give loans to people who are buying electric vehicles or solar panels or other climate-forward types of technologies. I'm getting close to 5% on that CD, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, there are options out there that are doing well financially for you and also doing well for the world, and that are easy to open an account. It took me 15 minutes to open an account with Climate First, easy to transact through mobile. My primary bank is based in my city, and I do everything through my phone, and they're helping people in my city. So there's lots of options.
So, Janine, if somebody wanted to find one of those banks, how would they go about searching for it? Do you have anything on your website, or is there an aggregation site of these types of banks? How would someone find those?
Yes, there are. So one great resource is called Mighty Deposits. I think it's mightydeposits.org, I'm pretty sure. And you can look for a bank there. There are other banks as well. And one of the things that I did when I wrote Activate Your Money, every chapter in the book, and I don't think people fully realize this when they read the book, but every chapter in the book has a take action section. And it tells you these are the steps to actually move your assets or rethink this particular asset class, because the book is written where in the middle section, it goes asset class by asset class. So it talks about cash, cash equivalents, fixed income, etc. There's a website called activateyourmoney.net that's tied to the book, and you can go in, you look up a chapter in that website, and it will take you to a take action section, and you can download spreadsheets, documents, tools, all kinds of things that you need to actually do what it says in the book. And that's all free. And that also has a dig deeper section for every chapter where you can go, and there's all kinds of links about how to gain more information about that particular topic. So the cash chapter has a dig deeper section, and you can find other resources there as well.
You mentioned you can do this with fixed income too. It seems to me, after reading your book, that it's a little harder there with regards to funds versus individual investments. How do you do it? How would you recommend our audience take fixed income into the values aligned investing category?
So there are three ways to do it, I think, depending on one, your level of assets for that particular asset class and your desire. So the easiest is to just invest in funds, broad market sort of fixed income portfolios through the stock market. That's the easiest. And there are some listed in the book. So part of what I do in the book is I give actual examples of things that you can invest in. There are not a ton in fixed income that way. There's not a ton, but there are some. And if you can put in 100,000 or more, you can get more options. So that's one option. The second option is, and this is what I do, is I actually found a financial advisor who has built a separately managed account for me. So I gave her all the assets that I wanted in my bond portfolios, and she's buying individual bonds for me based on my SDGs and the things that I want to achieve. So that's an option. It's harder to find. There are not that many people who are accomplished at buying and selling bonds, but I do that. And according to her, you can have a bond portfolio like that with $50,000 if you want. I think that's a little low in my view. I think a little bit more in a bond portfolio that's separately managed or where you're buying your own bonds would be better for diversification purposes. If you have 250,000 or more that you want to put into a bond portfolio and you have a financial advisor, then you can work with them to get you into things like Invesco, and the other organization is escaping my memory right now. I'll think of it, but I think it's Breckenridge. So those two advisory firms or investment firms have funds that are specifically bond funds for gender equity, for environmental purposes, and for other lenses or criteria. So those are three different ways that you could do this depending on your assets.
So I have an observation, Janine. So you've referenced a few times that your investment person is a woman.
I have two.
You have two. Okay. Yeah. So you're obviously, when it comes to your investing, you're investing in that way as well, because, I'm a CFP and the numbers don't look so great in terms of women CFPs and minorities and things like that. So you are, I guess, again, speaking with your pocketbook by using the services for your investment professional that's a female. So you definitely walk the talk for sure.
Yeah. My CPA is a female too. So is my lawyer. They're all women, come to think of it.
If I remember correctly, 20% of CFPs are women, but only 2 to 3% of those are people of color. And that is the way it was 20 years ago. So there really hasn't been much movement in that regard. And it's something we need to continue to work on. It's sad, but you guys are making a difference in this regard. And I am privileged to be aligned, values aligned with you guys.
You better be.
I'm a big fan of women's leadership. And for these reasons that you've been outlining. And one thing we need to understand with regards to investing is sort of the spectrum of values aligned investing and getting out of what you call two pocket thinking. Can you tell us what that means and then give us the idea of what the spectrum of values based investing is from traditional to philanthropy?
Sure. So two pocket thinking is what I sort of referenced earlier, where you have one pocket of money that is meant to maximize return, irregardless of what it's doing in the world. Just maximize return is all that matters. And then the other pocket is the pocket that you do good with and you have your philanthropic giving. And you can think of those as two posts of a football field, right? They're two ends of that football field. Traditionally, that's all there was. So what I do, values-aligned investing, is all this stuff in between. And it can run from anything. And this is where perfect is not the goal, okay? And you can go anywhere in this kind of investing from, I'm going to get as close to maximizing my return as possible or even outperforming. And a lot of research shows in the stock market, which is where I know most people are invested, the kind of investing I do actually does do very well. It is equivalent to or outperforms traditional investing. So you can get there. You can be all in the traditional space, values-aligned space, be getting a really great return. And it goes everywhere from there all the way closer to philanthropy, where the impact that you're having is greater and greater and greater. And you may even end up in a situation where you decide consciously, I'm going to give up return because the impact that this investment is making is so great that I'm willing to take a concessionary return here. So at one end where you're closer to traditional investing, chances are you're not getting as perfect a return. And as you get closer to philanthropy, you're giving up return to have a greater impact. And there's everything in between.
You talk about different levels here. I think level one is first, do no harm. Level two is benefit stakeholders. And level three is develop solutions. What do each of those mean?
So do no harm means sort of what Jackie was talking about when she was talking about her individual stock portfolio. It's don't invest in things that are doing harm. Get out of the tobacco industry. Get out of the industries that are polluting the planet or putting plastics in our... Did you know we have like a teaspoon of plastic in our brains at this point? I mean, it's gotten crazy. Or that are putting chemicals in our food that are harming our children. Get out of those companies. That's what do no harm means. The second one, which is benefit stakeholders, is think more broadly. Think about what is this company doing in terms of its workers? Is it giving them a fair wage? Is it giving them a viable way to live? Is it thinking about the community that it's in and helping people in the community? Is it ethical? Does it have a diverse workforce? Does it have a diverse board? So it's a broader base of sort of characteristics and criteria that are going to help a company do better in the long term. And it has been shown that when we think about these things, when a company does better at these things, it also does better financially. So that's what benefit stakeholders mean. And the third one, which is targeted impact, is where you say, you know what? I'm going to invest in a company that is making solar panels, or I'm going to invest in a company like I'm invested in one that is taking clothing that is excess clothing and it is reducing it down to thread and then remaking it into new clothing. That's a company that would be a targeted impact. That company is doing something that is all about the impact that it's having in the world. So those are the three different levels. And you can get to those three different levels in different ways through each of the asset classes as well. So I go into that in the book a little bit too.
Janine, these are things that, let's say, we talk on the show about investor policy statements. So would, this impact investing, value investing, and some of the things you just read off, so this has a place in the investor policy statement?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I love that you do that and that you talk about that. Yes. So an investor policy statement is a really important thing for yourself And if you have a financial advisor, it's a really important thing to be able to talk with your financial advisor about what you want. And in fact, when we have women go through our course, they leave with an investor policy statement that also includes their impact. It talks about all the traditional things in terms of, what kind of returns you're looking at, what your risk profile is, what you want to achieve with your money, but it also puts the values piece in there too.
Yeah. So as far as your book, and we talked a lot about it already, but it's been out since 2021, amazing book. So from 2021 to now, is there anything you wish you would have put in the book or something that you think is worth talking about that just did not get enough play in the book?
Wow. I don't think I could have put anything, to be honest with you. It is really full of all the wisdom that I gathered through over 40 years, almost 40 years of investing. And it's not even just my wisdom. What's kind of amazing about this book, although it sounds like it's written by a single person, when I started writing it, I realized how much work it was going to be because I started by interviewing all these people. I wrote the cash chapter first and I did all these interviews. It took me a month and a half to write that chapter. It's like, this book is going to take me forever. So I reached out to 40 women I knew who were financial advisors, angel investors, venture capitalists, philanthropists, ran donor advised funds, all these women. And I was like, hey, would you write a chapter of my book for me or the whole, part of a chapter? And I got them all to write early parts of the book. And then I took all of their stuff. I rewrote the whole thing so that it had one voice and it was consistent throughout. And then I sent every chapter to 20 to 25 women and had them read it. And half of those women were experts and half of them were readers. And I got their feedback and I rewrote the whole book again. So I had about 150 women and some men help me write that book. So that book is the consolidated wisdom of a lot of people.
You use the wisdom, too, of some of the founders of this movement. And I want to give a couple of shout outs to people like Joan Bavaria. And who else was it? Amy Domini.
Amy Domini, yeah.
Can you tell us who those are and why they are founders of this movement, please?
So what's really interesting about this kind of investing that I don't think people know, I think people think it's kind of new. I think people think it's maybe may not be around for very long. This actually goes back to biblical times. Biblical times. So, and it's very steeped in religion. So if you look at Jewish law, Islamic finance, Catholic, the Pope has put out an encyclical that tells people how to vote, Catholics to vote with their values, Protestants. I mean, it is ingrained in a lot of religious thinking, what our values are and how that ties to our money. So in this country where we saw the founding of this was in the mid 1700s with the Quakers, who said their members could not benefit from the slave trade. That's how far back this goes in the United States. It started to rise again in the 1960s, 1970s. As people were looking at the Vietnam War, they were starting to look in the 80s at apartheid and thinking about how their money could make an impact. Nuns in the 1970s started saying, you know what, we're going to invest our money in our local community to help the people that we're serving. And Joan Bavaria was a woman who in the 1980s started the very first values-aligned financial advisory firm called Trillium. It still exists today. It's got several $billion under management. And about 8 years after Joan, Amy Domini came along and created the first socially responsible index. And that index is still in existence today. And Domini Investments is still a business. And they help people invest this way. They have a variety of funds that you can buy. And part of what Domini and some of these earlier players do, in addition to investing, they do shareholder advocacy. So they work with companies to help those companies align their behaviors more closely with all stakeholders and to really benefit those stakeholders. So yeah, women have played a very, very significant role in this, as have religious leaders from the very beginning.
So how does the Domini 400 social index compare to the S&P 500? And would your world B, let's see that index overtake the S&P 500?
That's a great question. And you know what? I don't actually know the answer. I haven't done a comparison. But what I can tell you is that there has been some research on two S&P 500 funds, one of which is just a regular S&P 500, and the other one is an ESG 500, and the ESG one has outperformed it over the last 5 years by 15.1%. So while I don't know the KLD one specifically, I do know that when I said earlier you do not have to give up financial returns, I meant it. I'm looking to, it's the S&P 500 ESG outperforms the S&P 500 index 15.1% from launch date in 2019 to through the middle of 2024. And when I talked to somebody, when I was on another podcast recently, and I mentioned that, it was Doc G, he said, yeah, but that's only 5 years, Janine. What about the last 20? And there's data that goes back to the 1970s. So although it's a somewhat older study, it was done in 2015. There was a study that was done that looked back, 2,000 studies going all the way back to 1970s. And it showed that you do not give up financial return if you're investing this way. Now, the term ESG is, you got to understand that term is really under attack right now. And I think it's really misguided, and it doesn't really explain what ESG really is. And ESG is really it's a way to analyze companies beyond financial return. It's a way to analyze companies in the current reality of where we are today in terms of climate, in terms of the way what people want from companies, what it takes to be an ethical, viable company. So it's additional data that you can use to make an informed financial decision, which I think is what most of us would want. So there's plenty of data to show, even backwards looking, that you do not have to give up financial return. But I would also suggest that as we look forward, the world that we're in these days is so unpredictable. It's so unknown. There are so many changes in terms, not just climate, but AI, all this stuff that's coming at us right now. We're going to need more information to be able to really make good decisions about our investment choices. And so I applaud the attempts to try to give us that data.
So, Janine, is there a website where people could check their funds or look for funds, based on certain values? What was that?
So there is one of my favorites. There are several things that are available online for free. Again, I talk about them in the book and on the website, but my favorite is something called As You Sow, Invest Your Values. So if you just Google that, just Google As You Sow, Invest Your Values, it will take you to a web page where you can enter the ticker symbol or the name of an investment fund that you have. It doesn't do individual companies, but it does funds, and it will show you really detailed information about how that fund is invested in terms of fossil fuels, gender equity, private prisons, guns, weapons, deforestation, tobacco, etc. And it's profound. It's really a remarkable tool. And you can use it both to look at what you're invested in currently, and you can also use it as a tool to find an alternative.
Well, that's another screening tool that we should all think about in our investing, right? But one of the things that's a headwind for this is, doesn't it cost more? Aren't the expense ratios somewhat significantly more to invest in these funds? What would you say to that?
Not necessarily. If you are investing in a mutual fund, then you're going to pay more, like a mutual fund. And sometimes they have a little bit higher fee. But again, so in terms of fees, I'm going to give you two answers to this. First, in terms of fees, I don't care about fees. What I care about is the final return. So I think sometimes people get too twisted around this axle of fee. And in doing that, they're not looking at what the return is. So I'm more interested in what is the final return minus the fee, and does that outperform? And I will pay 1.5% every day if it's giving me a better return than something that's charging me 10 basis points. That said, you do not have to make the choice of having higher fees. So as an example, I know the FIRE community loves VTSAX, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. I realize it's like the holy grail in this space, right? It's like the perfect fund for some people. And I own it too. I've owned it for decades. I have a lot of embedded gains in it, sadly, because I want to lose it. But I decided as I was doing this work, I was like, I want to find something like VTSAX that is broad market, low fee, large cap blend, all that. And I used As You Sow and other tools, and I found something called ESGV. It's another Vanguard fund. Same low fee, not quite as broad market, but still pretty good. And I looked them both up on As You Sow. Vanguard is horrible. They get D's and F's. It's horrible. And ESGV gets B's and C's, and I think there's an A in there. So it's not perfect. There are things that I could have chosen that were all A's, but they were too far away from the Russell 1000, Russell 2000 benchmark for me. So I chose ESGV. I invested in it. I've owned it 5 or 6 years. It has outperformed VTSAX every year except 1 year. I think it was 2022. They were both down. VTSAX was down 19%. ESGV was down 22%, but every other year it's outperformed. So I'm getting a better return and a better social impact, but not a perfect social impact.
Why do you think that is? What do you think causes that bit of tracking difference?
In terms of when you say the tracking difference, you mean that is outperforming?
Your ESGV and chill versus the VTSAX and chill.
I think it's doing better because it's probably a little heavier weighted in some of the tech industries. And also, if you look at oil and gas, which it doesn't hold as much of, that has dragged the market down. I mean, if you look over the last 10 years, it has been going down, 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 down. And there was a pop because of the Ukraine war, but I don't think that industry is going to do great for us. And so I think that there are certain things that ESGV isn't in that's actually dragging the market down, and that VTX is still holding. And so it's taking that hit.
Oh, so that makes sense because I don't do VT. And again, this is not any kind of specific, recommendation or anything like that. So just the disclaimer. But my go-to stock index fund is VUG, Vanguard Growth Fund. And that has about 200 companies, mostly tech, but it gets a score of, I think, a C, which is a little bit better than, the VTSAX.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
So everyone just has to obviously look at their own investor policy statement, look at their own values, and see what best aligns with them. And you've just given us a lot of tools to help us do that. With the caveat, you don't have to give up return. So my VUG has performed better even in the long term. But again, that's just for me. Right. And it does its job for my portfolio. So you've given us so much in the book, and just your knowledge that you've built up, from all these past years. That's been amazing.
Well, thank you. And I actually just want to jump onto what you just said because of what you said about the disclaimer. And I should have said that early on too, that everything I say is for informational and educational purposes only. And even when I mention specific investments, these are my investments. They are things that I have done, and I'm not endorsing them for anybody else. So thank you for that, as I normally always think about the disclaimer.
Having said that, though, and wanting to look at the world as a global economy and from a global perspective, and wanting to potentially have an international tilt to your portfolio, we have VTSAX and BNDX. What would you recommend for potentially a bond allocation or a stock allocation that includes diversified international perspective?
So that's a great question. I'm not going to give you a specific answer. I'm going to say there are some things in my book. I haven't looked at where things stand right now to really tell you this is the thing that I found that I think is super interesting. There are some international funds in the book, and yeah, I'm not going to give you a specific answer again, just because I don't want to, because of my disclaimer. Fair enough.
Read the book, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah.
Bill loves that international stuff. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
yeah.
Oh, great. And more than anything, I like this book because it's such a great reference to keep around. It has so much rich information. It goes deeper than what I find in some other books. So it is definitely one worth keeping around. And I've got mine right back there.
Well, I have to give you a shout out too, because one of the guests that's been on our show actually wrote a blurb for you. David Stein said, activate your money brings women and the power of their money to the forefront of the conversation around investing for financial and social return. So, you've got a fan, a male fan who's been on our show, and I just needed to pay homage to him.
Thank you so much. Well, I love him. I think that he is just amazing. I discovered him while I was writing my book. I became a member of his work. I think his podcasts are great. And for somebody who's just starting, going all the way back to the beginning, because he's gotten much more sophisticated in what he is explaining now. But if you go way back to his early stuff, it explains like what is a bond? How does it work? I love him. I think he's a great guy.
And another person that is a friend of mine is also in your book, and I want to hear how you know her. Lynn Frere says about your book, I have sought to better align my investments with my values and have been looking for a roadmap to do so. Activate Your Money is a detailed, hopeful, and inspiring compilation of information for others like me who see greater potential in the world and are determined to be a part of the positive change. How do you know Lynn?
I think I met her through someone else in the FinCon community before I even knew what the FinCon community was. So I'm a major networker. I will talk to anybody. I'll meet anybody. All the time. And somewhere along the path of writing my book, I heard of her, and she and I had a fabulous conversation, and she gave me some insights that I think ended up in the book. So yeah, I think it was through the FinCon community that I got to know her.
And that's how we met you too.
And Lynn is a joy. She's very good friends of both of ours. She spoke at the First Economy, so I will drop that in there. But she is a very deep, holistic person. I think she talked about this community show up for you. It was a great talk. We need to get her on the show, Bill. But she is awesome. So we love to find these connections, right? Only 3 degrees of separation.
Exactly. And actually, I think you guys know Bernadette Joy too, right? Don't you? Do you know her?
Yeah. We met her at FinCon. Yes, we did.
So she has gone through our training, and she went through some of our training and sat down with her husband and moved a significant portion of their assets into more values-aligned investments after going through the experience of Invest for Better. Yeah.
So we need to get her on the show as well. So you talked about this training that you do for women. I'd like to hear more about that. And we're excited to hear about what new you have going on now.
Sure. So the way we work is we actually put women into small groups of about 8 to 20. Think of like an investment club. And they go through a facilitated experience where they learn together and they learn from somebody who's more experienced than them. And so we currently have a 6-part series. We're upping it to an 8-part series soon. And they have conversations. They start with talking about their money stories and what they believe about money. And we take them through a values conversation. We get them thinking about how they're currently invested. And then we take them through a process of looking at their assets in different asset classes and what they could do differently. And as I said, they walk out with an investment policy statement. So part of what we've heard from women is that they love this opportunity to actually talk to other women about their money. It's not a thing that they usually have an opportunity to do, and it's transformational for many of them. So we have a getting started course, and then we've created a number of advanced courses too. We're having one that train women on things like angel investing. It's something a lot of women have never thought about. So we have a beginning angel investing course. We teach you how to find a values-aligned financial advisor if that's something that you want. We teach you how to think with an environmental lens or a racial justice lens or other ways of addressing your portfolio. So that's what we do. We actually have our recruiting right now for women who want to go through that Circles experience, and you can just go to investforbetter.org and look up courses and sign up. We'll be running our curriculum again in September. So we do it every year in April and in September. This year, we're particularly excited because we have a special curriculum that we are developing specifically for Black women, so that Black women can come together in inclusive circles to talk with other women who have had similar experiences. We're calling it Shifting Wealth, Shaping Futures, and we are recruiting for that right now too. So we will have 8 circles running. That means we have a total of 160 women who can do this. So if women want to do it, they should sign up right now. And you can do that by going to investforbetter.org/SWSF and sign up for that.
Yes, I love that you're doing that. So we will put this in the show notes, but when does it close?
So it will probably close. This version of it will close. We're going to kick off the circles in the middle of April. So probably the first week of April, you want about a week of time to get ready for your first meeting. So we've got a couple more weeks. I think that there is, and it's really inexpensive. It's $149 through the end of this week, and then it will be $250, but it's a very inexpensive curriculum. And the reason that we do that is we don't want any woman to not be able to participate. We are a nonprofit. Our goal is not to make money. Our goal is just to help women get this information. And one of the things that we're doing with Shifting Wealth, Shaping Futures actually is all of the women who are leading the circles are financial coaches, financial planners, have knowledge in this space. Most of them run their own small businesses, and we're going to let them keep going with this curriculum. We're basically giving it to them. So part of the way we're hoping to grow the footprint of who hears this information is by letting other people take our curriculum, run it under their own brands.
Yeah, you gave me a great sneak peek into that. And part of my journey learning about investing and personal finance was a Better Investing investment club. So I love the idea of these investing circles, and it does make a huge difference to be around other women.
Yeah, it really does.
One of the inspirations for you, I think, was the Beardstown ladies. Wasn't that it?
Yes. So the Beardstown ladies was a group of middle-aged women, which I guess I am now, middle-aged women from the Midwest who back in the 1980s formed an investment club, and they were investing in blue chip companies you couldn't do badly in the 1980s, actually. And they did well with their money, and they wrote a book. And they taught women how to put together investment clubs and learn how to invest together. And the book came out in 1991, and I was in a club like that. My girlfriends and I formed a club in San Francisco. We called it Fog Bank. And I was in it for 3 years. And we'd get together, we'd have dinner, we'd have wine, and then we'd get down to business and learn how to invest.
Well, what's interesting here is women love to collaborate. And I haven't heard anything about male investment clubs. Do they exist? Maybe
I don't know. I think they might. But, when I worked internationally, so part of what I used to do was I worked in something called microfinance. And microfinance is the act of giving small loans to people, generally women, to help them build little businesses to come out of poverty. And all over the world, there are these groups of women who come together, they pool their money together, and they then lend it out one at a time to the different women. They're called susus in some countries. They're called Saving Club in other countries. They have different names everywhere. But it's always women. I don't really know very many of those microfinance groups that are men primarily.
Well, I can tell you the organization Better Investing, they have all kinds of clubs, and the majority are men. So I guess because there's so few women talking about investing, that's why we're trying to elevate, women talking about investing, learning about investing, because the default is for them not to, or the majority are not investing. And I was one of those people when I was younger and I was married. I was investing very differently than what my husband was doing. So there's a ton of men investing clubs. If you just Google betterinvesting.org, you'll see
Interesting. Yeah.
And what's interesting too is there's research out there that shows that women are better than men at investing and have higher returns because maybe men take on too much risk or speculate.
That's exactly right. In fact, part of the reason, so there's a great study by Fidelity. They looked at 5 million accounts over a 10-year period, I think it is, and they found that women outperformed by 40 basis points a year. And it's because men are more inclined to invest in stocks, individual stocks. Women are more inclined to invest in funds. Women are more inclined to buy and hold. They're more inclined to hold tight during the down markets. And men are less likely to do those things. And so the strategy that women use tends to be better for returns.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably a great upswing to close this female-centric podcast on. Well, the last question we always like to ask our guests is, do you have any tips in general with regards to ESG or socially aligned or aligned investing? What would you do for late starters? Anything different?
So for late starters, I think about values-aligned investing. I think of it kind of like a cake because first, you have to have the foundation. So you need to be a smart, confident investor writ large. So that's just important. And then where the values come in is where you're making your investment choices, but you're making those investment choices on top of a strong foundation, right? Like the icing on a cake. So for late starters, particularly women, what I would suggest is get started. Even if you're older and you're married and you're not paying attention to your money, please start. If you're not having conversations with your spouse, please do. There are too many women I've seen who end up divorced or who end up widowed, who don't know anything about the money that is gone in the family. So if you are not paying attention yet, step in, start paying attention, get yourself educated and informed. And as you're thinking about it, start having conversations about your values and start thinking about that piece. If you're already invested and you're a late starter, no problem. If you're still actually investing, don't necessarily change what you've already done and what you've already invested in because you're probably like me and you have embedded gains. But if you're continuing to put money in the market, then put it in differently. Think about your bank accounts. That's easy to change. And if you have the opportunity to do tax loss harvesting and to get rid of things that are not very good right now, buy into things that are.
Yeah, and I think you've given us so many options. It's not all or one, but so many things to think about if you do want to incorporate any level of value, impact investing. There's lots of ways to do it.
Tons of ways to do it across your entire portfolio. In fact, one of my favorite investments right now is a real estate deal. So I took a property that I co-owned with my sister. It was a residential real estate. I sold it. I ended up, this was just so fortuitous the way this all unfolded, but I wanted to do something more values aligned with it. And I ended up meeting a couple of young female real estate developers, which is such a rarity in Portland, Oregon, and they wanted to build affordable workforce housing, and they needed to get a start. They wanted to buy a piece of land. They needed some money. So I went in, I helped them buy the land, and they are having a ribbon cutting ceremony. I did this with them several years ago, and they're having a ribbon cutting ceremony in April to unveil 36 units of workforce housing. And I am now a co-owner of that building. So I went from a single family to 36 units of workforce housing and helped kickstart what they were trying to do. And they've already broken ground on their second property and they're moving along. So for me, that is what this is all about, right? It's about really uplifting other people, making sure that people in my community are supported, underserved populations are getting the loans they need through my banking, that I'm invested in schools and hospitals and purposes through my fixed income, that my stocks are not in things that I don't want them to be in, my real estate. I'm supporting women through private investing. So every step along the way, I'm looking at how I can use this money in a more impactful way.
And we'll bring it back to Vicki Robin again, because she mentioned that in order to have affordable housing on her island near Seattle, she house hacked with young people and rents out rooms in her own home and another home that she owns. So she does it in a micro level as well. I'm just so impressed with the possibility here. And you have opened my mind to a world of possibility that my wife and I need to look at as well. We can talk about the simple path to wealth, but we can talk about also the simple path to world health.
I love that. Oh, new tagline.
That's
I
right.
love
Look at
that.
Bill over there thinking.
Wow.
And in preparation for the show, I took a closer look at a lot of what I was doing and confirmed a lot of things for me. And I got a little more work to do. But this was so insightful. Like, our audience will benefit tremendously. We will benefit. And you've just opened our eyes.
And thank you for being with us here today. We encourage our audience to go read your book. Check out your websites. There's just so many resources that will open your eyes to the possibilities to think differently, to think in a healthy investing way, and to align your values, just like you do in your personal life, with your investing life. So Janine, we're going to have you back and find out what's going on with you in the future, because you're always doing something new.
I would love that. You gotta. I mean, what else is life for, right? Unless you're like exploring the next thing and pushing the next envelope. I mean, you gotta.
All right, Jackie, any final thoughts from you?
Just that Janine is extraordinary, and I'm happy to be aligned with you. I will definitely share. I don't know when this will episode. It may be after that new project you're working on is closing, but I will definitely share it on social media and hit up any friends of mine or any groups that might be interested, because it sounds like it's going to be awesome, and we definitely want to hear more about it once you get it going.
And we'll run it again. So if they miss the March, April timeframe, we will run it again for sure. It's not going anywhere.
As always, we men have a lot to learn from the women in our lives, and I feel like we've accomplished that today. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week on Catching Up to Fi.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Fi. Cheers.